So, I was having this one on one consultation session with one of my clients recently, where I shared one of my recent experiences, or you can say a story, that really liberated me from a lot of my own fears. Um, while we were having this discussion and I shared that story with her, we had this aha moment. Like, she was so pepped and encouraged. I could just see it in her eyes. It was time to get, bid goodbye. And I don't know what pulled me or what made me share that story that I hadn't really put out anywhere else. And I could see that the amount of difference it made. It was like um, our entire session was summed up into one concrete story, like all of our her problems. She was looking for one answer that could help her, and honestly, I feared that it wasn't the one that she was expecting, and I thought sharing one of my own personal stories would help her recognize what I am showing in a direction. And oh my god, what a wonderful, wonderful conversation we had. Okay, so I thought to share it here on the podcast to give you all an insight on what it was, and especially to give you that push before we get into the new year. We all know that we need, yeah, like this, the whole spirit and its encouragement, because a lot of times these events, the new year's, anything, a lot of times they become too overwhelming for a lot of us. So we all appreciate the support that we can receive in times, especially like these. So now, before I wanted to get into the story, I wanted to really, really specify who this story is for, because I think that's really important. Because it can only serve to people who are ready for it. Now, are you ready to take, if this episode is for you and this story is for you, if you are ready to take your biggest fly this year? I mean, 2022, of course. And are you dreaming to make 2020 your year of greatest growth? If yes, then yes, this episode is for you. And are you looking to make 2020 your year of calling all your dreams to life? Then this episode, darling, is definitely for you. I want to make sure that you know that sometimes it's just one moment that can help you get over a lot of fears and make all of those ambitions, make all of those dreams come to life. Just one line. It's such a thin line sometimes that even though we don't realize it. We all have fears, and some come from a place of concern, but let me tell you, a lot of others come from a place of fear, fear to expand. These fears sometimes wants to keep us safe from a natural place, like that you're going to get hurt, or like um you know fire, or like all of those things. However, I mean, there's a lot more debate on that, but a lot of fears come from our own self, from being hurt, or our own fears of judgment, or just the fear that we don't sometimes believe in ourselves enough. So I assume that a lot of people who are listening to this episode come from a place where they know that there's this one thing that they need to get over their fears. That, it's not, these fears are not life and death, or these fears are not, or something that seems more obvious. They know that their mind or their heart is just trying to keep them safe, but safe from expansion. And I want to share this story because I feel like it will help you open up your mind and maybe let go of those fears. Okay, so here we go. Okay, this is. So, what happened was, I had gone to a recent trip. Like, when my mom passed away, I was having a very hard time. I was in a very, very dark place. I didn't know how I would get up. I mean, I felt like my world stopped. Even though for a lot of people it felt like I was going on, I was doing everything. But honestly, that was just my way of dealing with the fear of falling, the fear of you know I just felt like if I would not do those things, I would collapse. And I think I just didn't want it took so much effort from me, but I had to do that because I knew that if I don't put my energy into something else, I would collapse. Also, my work became like a place of escape for me from reality, because my reality in real life, anytime I wasn't thinking of doing us 2 hours of work or anything, I was miserable. I was struggling. Every little moment I was struggling. So I was having a very, very hard time. And nobody teaches you how to deal with the loss of a mother, a parent, or any loved one that basically is an anchor in your life. And I felt like this ship that was sailing in the ocean without any anchor. Like, before that, it had a center that it knew no matter where it would go, it had something that was grounding it. But now I feel like I've lost that anchor, and I think that has been one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life. Okay, so this hasn't been the first time in my life that I've felt so dark and so lost. I had that a couple of years ago when basically I've shut down, um, you know, my first business. Of course, it wasn't as bad as this, but yeah, I mean, I was in a state of depression. I was dealing with a lot of things, so I knew that how things can go bad in such um, like a small time, and that I need to get hold of myself. I need to get control of my things if I need to keep going forward. See, in situations like these, we all have two choices: either we give up or we keep going. Now, giving up in life and death would mean that you give up on life, or you make your life not worth living, or you stop living. And or the second choice is that you get up and you choose to live. You choose to live to the best potential that you can, carrying the pain that you would have. I don't say the pain goes away. I only say that you learn a way to live with it and still find your best potential. So I knew a place where I tried to give up. I tried very hard to give up, and it was way more painful than keep going, honestly. That's what I feel. For me, I love a challenge. For me, I'm not afraid of failing. I'm afraid of quitting. I can keep going. I can keep failing and get up and then do again and get up. It keeps me going. But I just can't stop unless I'm just being stopped. I don't want to quit. I am ready to fail, but I will keep trying until I fail for the last time, and there's going to be no another time. So while everything was happening, I was dealing with my life, with myself, with everything. To a lot of people, everything seemed normal on the outside, whereas the things were very contrary on the inside. I decided that I needed to pull things together. I needed to give some time to myself, disconnect, and where, I just needed to see things from a different perspective. I was filled with so much fear at that point in my life because, when suddenly you have everything, especially one of your most precious things, and it's taken away from you in a whim, it's scary. It shakes you. It shook me. It shook me like, I would shake on slightest of sound. I remember going in the car, even at the slightest break, I would scream and I would fear that something bad's going to happen. I mean, I was afraid of every little fear of mine. I felt like all my fears were elevated to the top. Every little fear, if I was afraid of anything, I felt like that had gone to a 200% hike. And I was able to see this pattern. I was able to recognize this pattern, and honestly, I just didn't know. I was too vulnerable. I was too emotional. I was too afraid. And honestly, how can I not be? How can anyone not be? So I decided that I needed to take a break, give myself some time and reflect and just heal myself in whichever way I can. I decided I would step away from my current surroundings and I would go on a trip and to the nature and spend some time with nature and just be not around what my current reality is. So I escaped. Yes, I did. It was an escape. I don't deny that. I went to a little beautiful, gorgeous mountain town here in India. It's called Beer. It's one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. It's also Asia's second highest peak for paragliding. And of course, I knew that somehow, but I'm afraid of heights as hell. I have acrophobia, and I've been so afraid of height that I can't even tell you. But that's something that we go forward in the story. Now, when I decided that I was meant to go, I figured out I had a friend who had like a guest stay there, and I booked. Like, it was a big challenge for me to take that leap of faith because um, I had so much emotional responsibilities. I had so much emotional attachments, and I felt like if I was going, I was cheating on them. I was feeling guilty, but I knew that if I didn't do this, I am not anyways giving any percent of me. I mean, I didn't have enough in me. I didn't have enough to pour, and I needed to make sure that I find a way to refill myself. So I went there and I was having a good time, and I was able to spend some time with myself, just paint. Oh my god, that was sunsets and everything. It was beautiful. It was hard. I cried a million times when I was going, coming back, and everything in between. But that's a story for another day. Now what happened was that when I went there, I was like, I was full of fears. I was so full of fears that I knew that I couldn't live this way. That I knew that I can't keep getting afraid with every little slightest noise, or with the fear of what's going to happen tomorrow, or if someone goes out of the house, will they ever come back, or what if if I go and the whole house collapses, or like, all these thoughts. And I knew that I needed to get over this because I couldn't live this way. I was sure of that because it wasn't possible. And I was like, I don't know how to find an answer and how to find out a way to get over these fears. Now, the only answer that I found when I went there was I had a bag. When I went there, I had a bag full of my fears and worries. That seemed like a world to me. That seemed so heavy, so big, that I felt like, oh my god, there couldn't be anything as heavy or big as this. When I went and I reached beach, I saw these massive mountains. I can't even explain you how big they were. Oh my god, the green lush, they were the hugest mountains up close I have seen ever. And you know how I felt? I felt like a little girl with a bag, like a bag on its back full of worries, in the center of a rock with big, monumental, humongous mountains surrounded. This was my first lesson from the mountains. It made me quickly realize that I thought that I was, or I had the biggest of the grief or the problems or the fears, or that the world was so heavy for me on my shoulders. And when I stood there in front of these humongous mountains, they were gorgeous, beautiful, but they were scary. I was afraid because they felt so big and I felt so tiny. And it felt like a way that, like, I felt like the mountains were showing me my position, that they were telling me, you little girl, do you feel you have like all the worries and everything that you have is the biggest in the world? It was a way for me to realize that how little everything that I had was, and there was so much more in the world for me to explore, so much more to find, to fight, to live, to breathe. And that, of course, I don't deny that what I had was hard, but it wasn't hardest of all.
I needed to figure out a way. I mean, I know I had more capacity, I could get out of this. And I wanted to see something way bigger than me. And I felt so small in front of those mountains. And, it changed my perspective. It changed my perspective so much because it showed me that I am this one little human in this big, big, beautiful, gorgeous world, and that it was so beautiful that all my fears, all my grief, everything felt so light in front of those big mountains. They seemed nothing. They seemed nothing. And I can't even describe the feeling that I had. So, now let's get to the main part of the story. I wanted to share this part because I felt like sometimes we think things are so big in our head, but when we actually pull them out, when we see the reality, when we see what the world is out there, we realize how little the things were when we were thinking about them, and they may not be as big as we imagine them to be. Yeah. So, I figured that if I needed to get over all my fears, of course it's not a one day process. I needed to do something big. I needed to take a leap of faith and face one of my biggest fears, and then maybe all these fears would seem so small in front of them. And I'm sure by now you might have guessed that I decided to go paragliding. Paragliding in Asia's second highest peak. For someone who's so afraid of heights, I have acrophobia. I've never gone to like any such heights, and I've always been afraid of them. And I mean, let me tell you, I was at my most vulnerable self. I was so vulnerable at that point. I was like literally, I could cry with even a little snap of fingers. I was that vulnerable. But even then, I knew it was hard, but I also knew I needed to do this. I needed to do this because I didn't care of what will happen. All I cared was that since I wasn't able to face all these smaller things, I might as well jump for something that's bigger and face that. So I did. I signed up for my paragliding. It was the second last day that I had. I was so frightened. Just the day before, we had gone for sky sports, and to be 100% honest, I cried for over 6 hours. I stayed there. I made several attempts to do these high altitude sports, and I couldn't. I spoke to my partner. I tried to gather as much courage I could, but I couldn't do it. And honestly, that was very hard for me because when I came back, I felt like the fear that I took with me versus the fear I brought back with me was more. And now I had a choice to reframe that thought or go back home with an extra baggage. And I honestly did not have space for extra baggage in my life right now. I knew that I not only had to get rid of the baggage I had collected from the Sky Sports failure, but I also had to let go of the one that I brought with me. So I signed for paragliding. I made another day, another attempt. Now, where I was living, I mean, where I was staying, the mountain was 2 hours drive away. A rider was supposed to pick me. I had a flyer with me who was my guide who would fly with me. I thought the scary part was jumping off that cliff. I can't even tell you. Oh my god. Believe me, that was nothing in front of the journey I had of in the past 2 hours. The 2 hour ride to the mountain top was the dreadful ride I have ever had. Oh my god. We were going on the highest altitude in that town. That was the second highest altitude in Asia's paragliding history. I don't know. And the roads were, I mean, there was hardly any road. Yes. We were in a jeep, and one edge of the jeep was like, you know in the sky, literally on the edge of the mountains, and one was on the road. It was very tiny, and there were two-way traffic. I don't even know how they were driving. All this while, I was like, what the hell am I doing to myself? Why would I do such a thing? What if I have a heart attack? Yes, I thought I would have a heart attack. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? Why? But I was like, there's no way for me to get out of it now. Of course, I couldn't get out now. I mean, if I would just go back with so much more load than I ever thought. And then, honestly, I did not even have a choice. We were on our way to the mountaintop, and that mountaintop, I mean, we couldn't really go back from there. What really happens is when you go by a jeep on the mountaintop and you come down by a flying in the air, and that's your trip. You go by road, you come by air. That's it. I signed up for it. All this while, I was so scared of that. I believe me, even when I've done this, I've lived that incident. I feel like the hardest part wasn't the flying anymore. It was that destination. I mean, it was that journey to that destination. It was so hard, so painful. I was not facing my fear only while I was like, I felt like I would face my fear when I would fly. I mean, that's when I will be the most afraid. But honestly, that wasn't true. I was afraid every single second of my ride in the jeep to the hill, because I was going up in the air. It felt like a movie scene where, like, I felt like, oh my god, our car would flip at any point. I would go down, and like the height was only increasing. I was sitting on the window seat, and I was like on the edge of that mountain, and I was like, every time I would look like on the left, I would see like massive heights, endless. I felt like I was so high that even if anything happens to me or today, nobody would ever go. No, I came alone, and nobody would ever know. And it was so hard for me. At some point, I felt like crying, and like I would just stop, and I would be like, just take me back, just do something. But I pulled myself together. That was the hardest part. And I didn't know at some point, well, my whole body, mind, soul, heart was panicking, and I felt like I may get into a panic attack. I needed to tame myself. So I pulled out my affirmations. And at that point, my mind was not even working. So I quickly Googled a search that how manifest your affirmations to get over fears. And oh my god, I can't even tell you how much that little decision changed things for me in that line. I was like this patient who was in severe pain and knew basically what illness I had, and knew a little bit course of treatment, but I was in no way a professional. But I knew that if I waited for the right doctor and help, I may not even make it through. And my illness could only get severe from here. So the only option I had was to self-treat. So yeah, self-treatment it was. I quickly pulled out my phone. I was so panicked. I was so panicked that I couldn't even read out my own affirmations, and I quickly searched on Google affirmations to get over fear and anxiety, and I just kept on it. I held on it, and here's what it was. I constantly for 2 hours just kept on saying this to myself. I overcome my fear of anything and everything and live life courageously. I acknowledge that the only constant in life is changed, and I'm prepared for it. I'm free of anxiety and continue to do so. I'm capable of protecting and caring for myself. And yes, this was my medication. How funny it may seem, like this was, and it was such a powerful medication. I did nothing. I just held on to this affirmation like my life depended on it. And I shut my eyes, and I just kept on saying this to me. I overcome my fear of anything and everything and live life courageously. I can overcome my fear of anything and everything and live life courageously. I acknowledge that the only constant in life is change and I'm prepared for it. I acknowledge that the only constant in life is change and I'm prepared for it. I am free of my anxiety and continue to do so. I'm free of my anxiety and I continue to do so. I am capable of protecting and caring for myself. I am capable of protecting and caring for myself. This, my dear, was something that changed so much for me. I finally managed to live through the light, thankfully, to Google, who made me, self medicate myself with this powerful affirmation. I reached the mountaintop, and that's now the climax. I was there. Now I was like, I have gone through the most like dreadful ride of my life now. I am on this mountaintop. Oh my goodness. When I saw where we were, I was blown. My mind was frozen. I was like just on the highest peak, just on that top. I could see everything. Everything seemed so small in front of where I was. Everything seemed so tiny. The mountain was full of people. People were coming. They were getting on their suits and they were flying off. I saw so many people fly right in front of me. And I was like, maybe if they can do, I can do. Then I saw, women in their 50s, women in their 60s who came with their families and they flew. And I questioned myself, what is so hard for me? Why is this so hard for me when they can do it? They have all the reasons for them not to do it, but they choose to do it. Why can I not do it? So, of course, I encouraged myself in all possible ways. I wore my suit. My trainer gave me a little training. You get some try runs. We did our try runs. I was okay. I kept on saying to him, I can do this. I will do this. I'm not afraid. I can, even though I was completely the opposite of that. But I had to tell myself a story that only encouraged me and not discouraged, because I knew from this point I only had to find positive signs and positive actions only for me to make a positive action. So I decided I would go for it. I kept on saying to my trainer that I could do this, I can fly. Even though I was shaking with fear, I never let that come on my lips. I never let those words out. I kept on saying I can do this. I am not afraid and I will do this, and we did. Now when we were doing a practice run, I fell off the just on the edge. We try, they do like this mock fly off, and I fell thrice. My clothes were all dirtied. I was just on the edge of the cliff. I fell thrice on the edge of the cliff, and I felt like, if what if I would have just fallen a little far away, and I don't know. I mean, it felt so scary, but today it feels like I don't even know how I found that courage to do all of those things. I remember while we were doing our practice fly off, um, there was someone, like two boys, who in that process had to just give me a little push to jump, and just because of that one thing I was falling off the edge every time. I am someone who doesn't, I mean, I don't like things pushing me, especially when I'm so full of fear. And I already was feeling so much heavy, and it just didn't feel right at all. It was like someone was pushing me on the edge of a cliff, and it didn't feel like I was voluntarily doing something because I had a purpose. So I told my trainer that I will jump, and believe me, I will, for God's sake, but please ask them not to push me. And so he said, I told them, I will push, I will jump, Jay, just don't have to push me. I had all measures, safeties in place. Now, this is the most important thing. When you're flying in a space like this, there's no error of things going wrong. Everything was perfectly safe. There were no mishaps ever happened. I was safe and secure. I wasn't flying alone. I had a trainer with me who was an expert on national, international level,
who had flown hours in the sky via paragliding and other ways and knew what he was doing. I, in any way, would have not, I mean, not gotten hurt unless I wanted to self sabotage my way in some way. So it was safe, but it didn't, my brain was not ready to believe it. It was ready to think all the worst ways possible, that what if something didn't happen? What if this? What if that? And I had to get hold of it. That's what happens when we're full of fears. We want to do something big, and honestly, even if it doesn't work out, we know that there's nothing going to go wrong. I knew that even if I would have a worse flight, I wouldn't lose anything. I will still come back in one piece. But I was full of fear because my mind was trying to protect me of that experience. But I had to get out of it. So I told that I would jump. Nobody has to push me, and then we'll see. Now the final moment had arrived. He told me, my trainer, Vicky told me that now this is our final jump. He would lead the way. Sorry, I thought he would lead the way. Apparently, I was meant to lead the way. I was in the front seat, he was on the back seat. Yeah, that's how it works. I was leading the way. That means I was the one who had to take the first jump, and he was the one who would support and control our first fly. I was the one who was facing the mountains without knowing that anyone. What if I didn't jump? What if I fell off the cliff? I don't know. All those questions came to my mind, but honestly, I didn't give myself enough time to even think, because I knew if I would give myself so much time, I may not even go through this. So we did. We did it. Yes, I did it. I jumped off a cliff and I did not die. Yes, even though I was not afraid of dying. Honestly, at that point, I didn't have so much of purpose to live. I felt so disheartened that I wasn't afraid of dying, but it was just the fear of facing those fears. It was just the fear that was taking over me, that, of this expansion of, I don't know how I will get on the other side, or like how it will feel, or I don't know what those fears were, but I knew they didn't come from a place because I wasn't afraid of dying. I knew I wasn't anyway going to die because I had everything in place. I had a perfect trainer. I had made sure that I had everything in place, and that's how it went. We jumped off the cliff. I had the most wonderful time. I can't even tell you how beautiful that ride was. I was I was so high above. I was above the land. I was flying. I felt like a bird. I was in the air and I was controlling and where we were going, and I wanted, he asked me what mountain I want to go, and we would go into that direction, and then we flew, and it was like a most beautiful 25 minutes of my life. So beautiful. I felt so good. It felt like all that hard work was worth it, because if I hadn't pushed myself so hard, I wouldn't have been able to experience this. I'm so grateful when I fell off that, like I was falling off that cliff on the edge. Several times I could have given up. I really wanted to give up, but I didn't. And I'm so grateful I didn't, because I wouldn't have ever been able to experience this in my life if I hadn't put this effort. Especially at the moment I needed. I cried. I literally cried in our fly. I was so happy, and I felt so light. I felt so light. Like, I felt like I was just like a bird. You know, I when I was jumping off that cliff, that was a very big leap of faith for me. And I'm sure for a lot of people who are afraid of heights. I was on top of that mountain. There was nothing above us. I was in a valley. The valley was deep as ever I've seen from my real eyes. And I didn't know where I was going. I had to just jump.
When I took my final jump, I said a little prayer and I said, Mama, I'm coming to you. I made this a purpose for mine, that this jump was for her. Via this jump, I was going to her. And I knew that she's going to take care of me. And that's what gave me the final strength to do this. And it truly felt like I was seeing this from her eyes. I know how proud she would have been. She was such a wonderful, light, carefree soul. She would have enjoyed every bit of this. And I felt like maybe we were living this together. Maybe it was meant for her. Maybe it was meant for me. Maybe she meant this for me. She made this all possible. And I knew that I could only jump when I knew I had a stronger purpose. And I found that. I gave my first fly, my biggest fear, to my mother, and I told her to take care of me, and she took such great care of me. Now, why I'm sharing this story? Every time I look back at this experience that I've lived, it gives me so much strength. It gives me strength that I was so afraid. I had big dreams. I wanted to get over the fear, but every little way of my life, every little way of that time, I was only convinced of why I should not move forward. But I made all opposite efforts to make that null. I wanted to make sure that I kept on going. So I made so many efforts that I kept on going. I self-medicated. I found my purpose. I found inspiration in other people. Everything possible in my bag of tricks, only to get through that. And I'm glad, because sometimes when we want to take a bigger plunge, sometimes when we want to do the bigger things that we're always aiming for, that I'm sure a lot of us want to do for the coming new beginning, a new year. We all nobody knows how it's going to turn out, but we all want this to be ours, like every time. And maybe I am sure it's going to be yours and mine. I'm very confident of that. But sometimes when we have those big dreams, it's inevitable to feel those fears. It's inevitable that you would feel that, oh my god, what if I crash? What if this something happens? What if it's, all those what ifs. But you need to believe in yourself, that you just need to keep that leap of faith and take that jump. Know that you're protected. Nothing's going to go wrong. Even if it doesn't work out, you'll still be safe in one piece, loved, under a roof. Yes. I keep saying this to myself. I have such big dreams that I want to achieve, and they intimidate me. They scare me to hell. And then I talk to myself and I tell me, what if this fails? I'm still going to be protected. I still will have a roof under my head. I'm still as healthy. I still will breathe. I still have so many things I'm grateful for and I would ever need to survive. So I am abundant. I am full of abundance, and there's no way of feeling afraid for that. Now, as to get over my fears, I need to make sure that I face that fear, that I know that I'm protected and I'm loved, and that everything is possible for me, and take that leap of faith. I hope you take this story as that nudge for you. If you want to take that high plunge, if you want to fly, if you want to get off that cliff, it's your time. Know that you're loved, you're protected, and that you can get over any fear possible. You just have to work at it. That's it. And believe it. And take care of yourself. And be kind. And I hope that 2022 turns out to be the most beautiful year. The year of your greatest growth. The year where you face all your fears. And I wish you the best of the world and nothing more. I'm sending you lots of love until I see you again. Bye. Love, Charaka.